Thanks, Fred. Thanks for coming this afternoon. A year or two ago, I overheard my 12-year-old son practicing a violin etude, and it sounded strangely familiar to me. So that was actually an etude by Heinrich Kayser, a German violinist and pedagogue of the 19th century. It's etude number 6 from his book, but it sounded to me like a trumpet etude, something kind of technical if you played it faster. It wasn't Brahms, it wasn't Arban, but it was this one. So you might recognize that as Herbert Clarke's etude, number 8 from his characteristic studies. And I recalled his introduction, which I had remembered reading. He says in the introduction, "I made a thorough study of violin methods and exercises, and adapting much of the material I found therein for the needs of cornet players." Indeed, Clarke admits that his 24 etudes had been adapted from existing violin studies in carefully arranged form to suit the requirements of the cornet. I paged through my copy and came upon that etude, number 8, also written in C minor on the page. Looks strikingly similar. Now, I'm not the first one to discover this specific connection. It's been known for years. Clarke scholar James Madeja noticed a copy of Kayser's etudes among Clarke's things during his dissertation work in the 1980s. But it seems that up until now, no one has closely compared the two. Did Clarke simply copy Kayser's etudes and call them his own? The short answer is definitely not. They are significantly adapted for the cornet, as you can see from this brief example. So what, if anything, could we learn from this unique connection? This presentation draws on what we know about Clarke's background as a string player. I invite you to imagine what influence this might have had on Clarke's own musicianship and how we too might benefit from such influences. At the outset, it's important to note that Clarke was not just an amateur violinist. Clarke's father was an accomplished musician, church organist, and teacher. When Herbert was 5 years old, his father acquired 4 violins and began teaching him and his older brothers to play them. Even while his older brothers branched out into playing band instruments, Herbert was forbidden from playing any band instrument. For this reason, Herbert actually spent many years trying to acquire and learn a brass instrument in secret. Eventually, when he was 14, his mother gave him permission to play the cornet, but he continued to play the violin in a variety of ensembles. In 1885, the Clarke family moved to Indianapolis, where Herbert was blown away by the cornetist Walter Rogers. Incidentally, Rogers, who became a bandmate and mentor to Clarke, also played both cornet and violin. Around 1885, when his father wanted to form a family string quartet, Herbert switched to viola. In his autobiography, Clarke describes his practice when he was playing both instruments, cornet before noon and viola after noon. He says, "My improvement on both instruments astonished even myself." When Herbert became proficient at the cornet, he worked his way to the back of the same orchestras and joined various bands. He spent the summer playing cornet, while during the orchestra season he played viola. In Rochester, Clarke would play cornet in the band outside of the theater before each show, and then viola in the orchestra. In fall 1887, Clarke began teaching, first at Trinity College School, where he taught violin and directed a small orchestra from the concertmaster position. And then at Toronto College of Music. There he taught many things, including viola, cornet, band, and orchestra, until the spring of 1892, when he landed a position as solo cornetist with Patrick Gilmore's band. It's not clear how much, if at all, Clarke played string instruments after joining the Gilmore band. What's important to understand is that Clarke spent about 20 highly formative years from the age of 5 to nearly 25 playing violin or viola as much, if not more, than the cornet. We do not know if, when, or with whom he studied Kayser's etudes, but it's quite possible that he did so with his father or his early mentors and orchestra directors in Toronto, F.H. Torrington and John Bailey. It's possible, too, that Clarke used Kayser's etudes in his teaching in Toronto. We know that Clarke admired and advocated for imitating violinists for their approach to phrasing and vibrato. And Clarke writes in his autobiography, How I Became a Cornetist, about the influence playing in his family's string quartet had upon him. He writes, "The rehearsals of our family string quartet, Ed, first violin, Ern, second violin, Dad, cello, and myself, viola, taught us real music. I wanted to not only make a fair cornet player, but a good all-around musician, and so began to study the tonal qualities, compass, and fingering of all the other instruments which go to make up band and orchestra ensembles. I would try to hear in my mind the sound of what I was arranging, to catch the sounds without actually playing the parts. This not only trained my mind, but seemed to help me play the cornet better, and through it I learned to study my music mentally before ever attempting to play it. Likewise, I found that it enabled me to read all music more readily and to execute with greater fluency." Still, we are left to mostly just guess exactly what influences Clarke's experience as a string player had on him as a musician, particularly his cornet playing and composition. A comparison of these two etude books gives us a small peek into how the great cornetist developed his technique. We don't know, but perhaps Clarke first read these etudes on the cornet as a way to challenge his own highly virtuosic playing, or perhaps he simply grew up hearing them so often that they became part of his routine. Regardless, at some point, Clarke decided to adapt several of them to fit the cornet at a level that continues to challenge students and professional players today. They were published in 1915, and I believe that by studying Kayser's etudes and listening to performances of them, we might uncover the ways Clarke was pushed to expand the boundaries of cornet technique. If you're not familiar with Clarke's characteristic studies, you should know first that there are 24 of them, one for each major and minor key. This is distinct from Kayser's set of studies, of which there are 36. As you can see from this chart, Clarke's studies keep 10 of Kayser's etudes in the same written key. The other 12 are transposed to other keys, and 2 of them are changed from major to minor. 2 of Clarke's etudes appear to be completely original to him. The characteristic markings are sometimes similar, but do not seem to be related in any significant way. Let's look more closely at a few of the etudes, taking into consideration several of the goals Clarke notes in his introduction. I'll look at 4 characteristics and provide an example of each as we go, about comparing Clarke's etudes to those that inspired him. As you can hear, these are technical etudes that make various demands on flexibility, range, fingering, and tonguing. Except for the 2 etudes that appear to be original Clarke, those are numbers 16 and 24, all of the others are essentially in the style of a moto perpetual, studies that are almost entirely regular rhythmic patterns. The metronome markings are adventurous. Etude number 2, this is Clarke's etude number 2, is a great example. Clarke reduces the upper range of Kayser's etude, but maintains a vigorous allegro, marked quarter note equals 144, and specific articulations that require double tonguing. The rapid bowing technique, initiated by an accent of the bow for every group, provides a model for extraordinary reflexive control of the air and tongue. It is marked leggero, or lightly, a characteristic that can be more easily imagined when listening to the violin etude. Clarke alters the pattern to require additional finger technique rather than repeating notes, as in the Kayser etude. Demands on flexibility are not limited to just slurring in Clarke's method. This rhythmic leap study in Kayser's etude number 32 requires even bow crossing of a violinist. And then Clarke number 7 provides a similar challenge for brass players, as we must maintain even tone production in spite of the larger leaps. We'll listen to both of those side by side. I think of Clarke, the thing that I think about is comfort and ease, and that's what he says in his introduction. And anybody who has practiced his technical studies, according to the original markings, will realize Clarke's value for efficiency. He wrote extensively about how he went about developing an ease of playing for himself. Many of the characteristic studies are shorter than Kayser's originals, but they remain quite demanding. Clarke modifies them to provide for breathing, but certainly pushes the limit. Controlling the breath is of utmost importance. One of the most challenging etudes is Clarke's number 10, drawn from Kayser's etude number 30. Kayser's etude is certainly demanding for a violinist, including fast-moving notes, a quiet dynamic, a wide range, and non-stop playing. This certainly stretched Clarke's cornet playing in similar ways, even though he allows for a few breaths. Finally, in Clarke's preface to these etudes, he wrote that cornetists should, quote, endeavor to produce original ideas which no other players have ever thought of, and try to demonstrate their own musical and artistic individuality. Given the predominance of technical demands in this set of etudes, this statement seems rather contradictory. This is where the inspiration of string playing, I believe, is most apt. We often confine our playing to the traditional limitations of our instrument. We excuse poor tone or musicality because of the technical challenges demanded of us. But Clarke, drawing on his own violin playing experience, had expectations that became original ideas when translated to the cornet. It should be a challenge for us to play these studies as musically and stylistically artistic as possible, despite the demands of technique that threaten to distract us from this goal. Listening to a violinist perform these etudes can help us pursue this kind of artistry. These recordings of Kayser's etude number 10 and Clarke's etude number 21 provide a wonderful example of the musicianship Clarke strove for, even in this highly technical and challenging book of etudes. In conclusion, I'd like to leave you with 3 takeaways that I hope will further your own thought and investigation. Number 1, Clarke's musical contribution, his performance, pedagogy, and composition were significantly formed by his experience playing string instruments. Number 2, musicianship may be transferred from other, and especially early, musical experiences not limited to the trumpet. And finally, studying and listening to string playing, such as in Kayser's original etudes, may inspire trumpet players even today to extend their musicianship. Please feel free to explore any of these sources and recordings. You can find many of these with links on my website, along with a PDF compilation of Clarke and Kayser's etudes laid out side by side. I'd love to entertain any questions you have and discuss it further at the poster session as well. Thanks so much.